do the roll call. You can?
Everybody can.
That's it. You're fine. We have additions to the agenda, and looks like item 8 and item 10. One is consent agenda and some additions to personnel.
Consent agenda would be number 1, and under personnel would be number 4.
Okay. Do we have a motion to adopt the agenda?
Second.
Is there a second? Motion by Lou, seconded by Cheryl. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Passed. Approve and correct minutes from the February 11th, 2014 regular meeting. All move to approve. Motion by Dave, second by
Ellen.
Helen, okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Passed. Financial reports. For the scouts who are present, the financial reports are the green sheets that were down there. Do we have any questions?
I did have one question. I do apologize, community. My voice is just about gone, so normally I don't have to use the mic, but I'll do my best. Under debt redemption fund, that's really the refinancing that we did. So on both sheets, it was kind of a wash. We got the 2 million in, and then the 2 million went out. In the meantime, we were able to keep the money for a little bit, so we gained about $400 worth of interest. So, but it was really the financing that wrote.
Okay. Do we have a motion to approve the financial reports?
So moved.
Motion by Mark. Second. Second by Lou. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Passed. Then we have audit approval of bills.
This afternoon, I had yesterday afternoon, I had the opportunity to go into the district office and review the additional January bills and the February bills. I did not see anything that was out of the norm for this time of the year, so I would make a recommendation to approve the bills as written.
Can I take that as a motion? Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Lou. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Yeah. Okay, now we're on consent agenda. I'm assuming you want to keep following.
Yeah, unless one of the board members sees any specific thing that they would want to pull off of this, it's just a consent agenda. These are really our spring sports, if we ever get to spring.
If I just ask a question, Minister.
Yep.
Do we always have 3 assistants for track and field?
I believe that's.
I was
accurate that we
asking,
did.
yes, okay, just checking.
And the to be determined.
I don't-
Yeah.
So there are no 7th through 12, there are no 7th and 8th grade, so the 4
Okay.
is 7 through 12.
It just looks like a long list on this. All right, thanks.
Yeah, and also with the assistant golf and the junior high baseball, a lot of that is dependent on how many kids we get out.
All right.
Are any of these new hires? These are all coaches from last year?
Without double checking, I wouldn't be able to say that with certainty. Cheryl, I don't know.
Who is listed on there? I don't have the consent.
Ron Beauty, Ron
I think
Wilson,
so.
assistant baseball.
Ron would be a new baseball, he moved
Okay.
up from junior high, and we do have a new track, I'm guessing, or is it not on there?
Jeff
Slotsky.
Jeff Slotsky is new, Brad Nepson is no longer coaching, so Slotsky is
Don't we have to open that up then?
new. It was.
It was opened up?
Yeah,
Okay, so these hires were approved already?
Well, they were offered positions. Board still has to finalize things here.
But those two positions are new then,
Yeah,
technically?
Yes, without me going back to check, I would not be able to verify that. Todd says that those are two coaches that I would go with that, but I'd have to check with Max. But I would say that all of our required hiring procedures were followed if they're new coaches.
I'll make a recommendation to approve the consent agenda.
Motion by Mark,
Second.
second by David. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Passed. Next would be business. So, review and discuss information concerning stadium project.
In the board's packet is an agreement for the lease and use of the ballpark facilities. We've been meeting with the city. Bruce has kind of been the representative from the board and myself in the city and also the Amateur Baseball Association. If you remember, the Amateur Baseball Association came to us a while back when this was being built, talked about them leasing the facility or using the facility at that point. The big piece that did come up was that one of the things that they were looking at also just for during amateur baseball games is the selling really 3-2 beer at that particular time. With that, we did do a lot of research to see if it could even be done. We did find a community, Chad Hansen, that has been doing a very similar thing with the district to be able to do that. So we do believe this is something that's possible. The question now is whether this is something that the board wants to go forward with or not. This particular lease is nothing that says this is the piece. It was our attempt to put something together for community members and for the board to see something as we start the discussion in regards to this. We can go through the lease a little bit. I know on page 1 it talks on the third paragraph, Tom just talks that this agreement, or a type of this agreement, would be the leased facilities of the school during the non-school portion of the calendar year. So this would only apply during the summer months when school is not in session. And then you'd have to coordinate this with our community ed in order to make the scheduling work. On page 2, it talks about association will work with the school to coordinate and use the facilities for events that are arranged through community ed. In other words, community ed and baseball association would have to work together even if this area was leased to the baseball association. They'd have to work together to schedule any events that take place. Okay. But in the end, the community education will have access to the facilities for their needs. And later on, it does talk about that the school district, really in this case, community ed, would have the final say if there's a conflict that could not be resolved between the baseball association and community education. Then it talks about some definitions of facilities. Subject and person or purpose, it says the school hereby leases to the Amateur Baseball Association of facilities. In the packet, there's a diagram that shows what that would be. It's really the baseball stadium, just with the box around it, and that's what they're talking about when they're talking about the facilities.
Now, will that be fenced off accordingly?
Pardon me?
Would that be the fencing?
I don't think they're gonna have fencing all the way around the facility.
Otherwise, you're gonna keep that, if you put a permanent fencing up, then it really takes away from the football field and it's gonna cause a lot of issues. And especially on the north end, I'm sorry, the south end, you don't want to necessarily put a fence there because it's really easy to have it on the bank too, down on the one side, the other side. So we don't want to put one up. And I think if you put up a slow fence, then there's not gonna make it up, so. That was my plan. Hopefully with the basically the outfield fence and with the berms that are gonna be up, and stuff that's kind of gonna be all self-enclosed already anyway.
Because my only question would be is how would you police people from going beyond that? Would there be
Well, we've talked about that.
security wise walking around or somebody walking around to kind of?
We've talked about that, people that, who's running it, that, it's that, I mean, that's part of their job,
Okay.
is to do that. Also, the fence is still gonna be up on the east side, you know, on the road side.
Mhm.
That fence was, it's gone right now,
Mhm.
but it will, we just got that now be back up, you know, just as it was before. And it actually won't have anyone in there where you used to come in there,
Right.
it won't be, everybody's supposed to come in from this side of right here.
Yep.
And also included in the packet is the state law that shows that we indeed could sell 3-2 beer on school property. There would be some work that would have to be done with the city in order to change their own charters, I believe, to allow that to happen, or their own ordinances. So number 2 on page 2 talks about the subject and purpose. It talks that we would lease, the district would lease a facility to the Amateur Baseball Association for really their amateur baseball games. That's the primary piece of it, but it could also be other amateur baseball teams outside of Paynesville that also come in and lease a facility, and that would be run through our Amateur Baseball Association. Also, if like Rogers event would come in, if the Baseball Association was leasing it, then they would also probably go through the Baseball Association for that type of event. Anything that we allow through community ed would go through community ed then. Okay, so nothing would change any different than we've already done.
The one thing on that, Bob, maybe just to clarify a little bit, is if you have a large event like Roger Roskin's talking about, that still needs to be approved by the school board.
Yes, yeah, even if the Baseball Association agrees to run something like that, it would still have to be approved by the school board. Those individual events would be done on a case-by-case basis.
Just a question, what's the purpose of running that through the association rather than directly with the school?
Go to like a Rogers thing?
Yeah.
Well, it's because we're already leasing it, because we're leasing it
So
during
just
that
for
time
protection.
period. So, yeah, basically.
And for that type of thing, if it was one that they would not want to sell any kind of 3-2 beer, then I'd say we'd probably run it through community ed anyway. It'd be something that they would do, but because this one would be already, these guys would already be set up for that type of thing, we would do that.
We'll have the liquor license, we'll have the insurance, and all that stuff in place, so that's why you run it through us, I guess. If you were selling 3-2 beer. It's not really a liquor license, it's a, what's it called?
3-2 beer.
3-2 beer license, yeah, that's all it is. So, yeah.
On page 3, it kind of talks, and just to interrupt as questions come up, I just thought we would start with going through this. It talks that for non-school portion of the year is covered by this agreement, facilities are not subject to the terms of the lease. It just means that we would run it just like we run everything. That we agree prior to the termination of the lease that we would meet and talk about it before that would happen. The Baseball Association, the Amateur Baseball Association would like to go with a 3-year lease. Purpose of that is because they need to show the Amateur Baseball Association statewide that it's going to be a solid thing that will last at least a number of years, so that if the Baseball Association wanted to bring regions, amateur baseball regions or sections, whatever, into the community, then that the facility would be there if they decided that our facility would be the one that they wanted to use. So they would need, if we're going to do this, we need to at least look at it for that 3-year term. There are termination things in there, so I think if things didn't go well, I think certainly we would have enough reason to terminate the lease if we wanted to. The purpose would not certainly to be that. The purpose would be to make sure everything runs well so that we can see what's going on and whether we want to continue doing that. Towards the bottom, it talks about the association's substantial contribution to the completion of the facility, all the work that they've done on the storm shelter and stuff. In lieu of that, then they would not have a charge to use the facility. Okay, but they would be responsible for chalking lines, doing those types of things. Then towards the bottom, it talks about usage fees. They wouldn't have a usage fee per se to use at a minimum amount, but there would be some fees if they sold concessions. We would get 10% of whatever they sell. Talks about concessions, it talks about ticket sales. I might also bring up, although I didn't bring it up, might want to add programs into that, because sometimes programs can also be an awfully big piece of it. When we came up, we talked about the percentages of the net profit. We just felt that if we were to do this, if they don't make much of a net profit, you know, how can you take 75 or 25% of net profit when there's not much there? So we said, the less they make, the less we take. The more they make, the more the percentages go up. So if you see that up to $1,000 net profit, we would take 10%, and that would go into a fund to help us continue to maintain the facility. If they make over $8,000, we would get 25%. And non-amateur teams came in outside of Paynesville, we have a minimum of $100 fee. That's just something that we came up with, help cover the costs of electricity and all that. So there would be a minimum that they would be charged. Now, it'd be possible we could make more, but it would depend on concessions and everything else. We just felt that we didn't want to lose money if that happened. We wanted to make sure that we at least covered our own costs.
Does the school maintain the field in the summertime?
The school maintained the fields just like we do currently.
It's actually coming up in this list.
Okay.
Any other questions? Anybody from the community at this point? Then use and prohibited uses of a facility, it just talks about full use of the facility during the term of lease for the amateur baseball games. But they shall be obligated to coordinate the scheduling with community ed. It really talks about the fact that the association and community ed will work together to try to schedule the fields. But it does say at the end that, again, community ed has final say. And the school board, again, for special events, would have to give any approval on a case-by-case basis. The association rights and responsibilities. The association shall provide a contract for services to rate the infield area of the baseball field for all amateur baseball games, practices to provide maintenance of the pitching mound and bases for amateur baseball games, and apply chalk and stuff. In other words, they're going to make sure that the fields are good before and after the game goes. It certainly might do some promoting of baseball events, and they're responsible to maintain liability insurance, naming the school as an additional insured, and the school would also have our own coverage on that facility. And it gives kind of the numbers on that.
Is that, it says with deductibles not less than the following, is that, should that just be general coverages?
Well, there's certainly going to be deductibles. I think in this particular one, these are general coverages. We might have to look at the language on that. Every policy has a minimum amount.
Deductibles is the wrong word there.
Yeah,
Right.
so we'll certainly look at that.
Liability limits, it should be.
Yeah,
That's what it says on the policy that we got quoted, so liability limits.
then it does go on, and here's the one that we really need to think about. If it wasn't for this piece, really, we would have to probably go to the community and talk to that and have some input and stuff. But if the association chooses alcohol, then that really, I don't like the word alcohol because it's really a 3-2 beer. It's not hard alcohol. It's not anything over that would be allowed to be sold. At amateur baseball events, as set forth here and below, the association shall maintain the liquor liability insurance as required by the state of Minnesota and the city of Paynesville. So we would follow those rules. The requirements of the school regarding upkeep of the facility is laid out in the checklist. There is a checklist that you can see. It's just the first attempt. I have some work to do on that, but it was included in your packet, just a checklist of things that we would expect not only the Amateur Baseball Association to go over, but anybody that would use it. If they brought in a different team outside of Paynesville, they would have to use that checklist too. We expect that if anybody's going to use that facility, they need to do what's necessary to keep it up. We don't want to take a chance on things going in the wrong direction. In fact, I would say that we also need to have this discussion for even community ed. If they allow any organization to use that facility, I would expect the same type of checklist followed. That means if Legion comes in and uses the facility, whether they're charged or not, or whether there's any kind of fees associated with it, they would still have to go through that checklist to make sure that we don't have sunflower seeds over the whole stadium or anything else. You know, that the garbage is picked up, that things are thrown away, that we keep the facility looking good. The association shall comply with the requirements of the school regarding upkeep of the facilities. That would really be the checklist on things that need to be done. as laid out by the checklist, that would be Exhibit B, and again, that's an example, just to start in your packet. School rights and responsibilities, schools shall have the right to approve all functions of the facility except, however, of course, the piece with the lease of the Amateur Baseball Association. Again, it talks about working together to make sure that we schedule the facilities together, we do the best to use it to the best of our ability. But again, in the last sentence, it talks about in the event of scheduling conflict between the amateur baseball and the district shall have the final say. In the end, it might be necessary for somebody to make that decision. On page 6, it talks about will not be unreasonably denied by the school district for an event. In other words, we can't just make something up and say that they can't use the facility. We'd have to have a solid reason why they can't be scheduled. We'll be responsible for regular mowing, trimming, irrigation, maintenance, just like we would right now, within the reasonable budget limitations. That's put in there just to make sure that if we don't have the budget to mow that thing 10 times a week, that we don't mow the grass 10 times a week. We might be able to afford to mow the grass 4 times a month. But it will be based on our limitations, and the Baseball Association certainly talked about if we run into those issues, they're going to be more than happy to help see what we can do to make sure that that facility is kept.
Good question. Pirates have used this facility for years, right? Did they ever pay for the school anything? Yeah. So this will be new revenue coming into the school for budget upkeep.
Well, I know that we do have a policy committee meeting coming up, and one of the things that we'll at least start the discussion on is just our facility piece. Because right now, we really don't charge for outside facilities at all. So we need to start at least having that discussion to make sure that we're all on the same page. I'm not as concerned about charging as I am making sure that if we let anybody use it, that we keep that facility up. So by having a checklist or even some kind of down payment that they would get back, some kind of deposit, I think that wouldn't be a bad thing because things can happen. And we don't want to end up having to lose money because we're allowing somebody to use the facility for no charge. In Exhibit B, again, that's the particular list that's there, and certainly we're working on that. School have the right to establish and collect user fees for other events using the facilities which are approved through committee. And again, that's right now our past practice has been that we don't charge anybody for anything, and I certainly see a benefit to letting our community use things. But again, I would say we certainly don't want to, we want to make sure the facility is kept up. Responsibility of the school to maintain the facilities and equipment in good order and repair. And again, that's within our economical constraints. Shall be a responsibility of the school to maintain insurance for firemen. We would have that regardless. And then it says general rules for operation of the facilities. Again, I apologize. And governing alcohol sales. Again, I would like to see that go to 3.2. So it's very specific on what that means, but we can certainly talk about that.
The actual bill says 3.2 malt liquor, so we might as well use the language right out of the statute.
If it's something that we end up deciding, I'd like to be as specific as we could on that. And I don't think that the Baseball Association would have any issues with that. Again, talks about improving case-by-case basis, but again, if we were leasing this property to the Baseball Association, then they would have control over that during their games. Talks about if the 3.2 liquor license is issued by the city to the Amateur Baseball Association in accordance with the requirements of Minnesota statutes. It would be allowed all state and local, when alcohol is allowed, all state and local laws related to the sales of that would be observed. If it's allowed, we'd be able to have some temporary signs up. Excuse me. Some temporary signs up, but in the end, all of those signs have to come back down at the end, so that there's no advertising or anything of things that we would like. Another thing that was talked about a little bit is tobacco, although there is a state law that says we're allowed, if we wish to sell 3.2 beer, there's no law that says people can smoke on school grounds. So that would not be allowed to take place. Talking about cups or cans, when it's served, at the event, after the end of each event, again, it gets back to the cleaning, everything's gotta be picked up and thrown away. In fact, here it says removed from the premises, so they'd have to bag everything up and get it to one of our dispensers for trash. Number 7 talks about no youth events shall be scheduled in the area when there are events scheduled in which alcohol sales will occur.
Does that mean if we have an amateur baseball game going on that they're selling beer, that we can't use the fields around it for the kids and stuff?
I agree, I think that should be turned around. If there are youth events scheduled, no alcohol will be served. Turn the statement around the other way.
So, so just for discussion, so we're clear, we have a baseball field just south of the stadium project.
Yeah.
I agree. We're fine with
Okay, you're fine with that then? Is
that. We're
that,
just changing that sentence around. It
Right.
makes sense.
I
We're not gonna
was
schedule a
trying to
baseball
clarify.
game when there's youth events instead of,
But- I guess my question then would be just because this is something both the community and the board needs to be clear on. Would that then mean, how about, we got softball fields on the other end of the school grounds on the north side? Would that include those?
like I
So
said,
the discussion we had.
we talked about basically if it's on the high school grounds, we're fine with that.
That we would.
It's probably gonna have an effect for a half an hour of a game every once in a blue moon. The majority of the games are at 8 o'clock at night or later, and they're under the lights. Well, no other field has lights, so,
So we should get that clarified then.
you know, and if there's gonna be an amateur baseball tournament on a Saturday, Sunday type of thing, where they're gonna have a tournament, that'd be up to something that's coordinated with the community department well ahead of time, or you knew not to schedule anything else there. So we're fine with that.
Then it talks about non-school organizations holding events at the facilities will, as a condition of holding the event, be required to provide one or more adult stadium monitors. I think that's part of what the question was about, how are we gonna make sure that this takes place? And the school does have the ability to set the number to that. So, you know, certainly we would talk with the Amateur Baseball Association and say on a normal game, you might need one person that can check and make sure that things don't leak. The other thing that you need to be aware of is that if they were to leave the facility, they could get ticketed for alcohol carrying around, if I'm not mistaken. So they don't have the ability to leave the facility without getting ticketed for that. They can't walk around with any kind of a beer product or alcohol product in their possession outside of that stadium area. So we're entitled to set the number of monitors for the particular event. At least one such adult stadium monitor shall be on the facility site at all times during any kind of events. Commit to having that stadium monitor on hand to ensure that the organization holding the event meets its obligations under the facilities use agreement, including but not limited to monitoring behavior of fans and participants, but also overseeing the cleanup of the facility, making sure that no damage is done. Then it just goes into some laws. Any altercations, verifications, modifications, or waivers of the provision of the agreement shall only be valid when they have been reduced in writing and signed. Really just talks about the fact that we need to work together to do this. I don't think, at least in the rest, unless there's something that wants to talk about, I think that's kind of the main gist of it. I also do think that we probably need to come up with some kind of form, if something doesn't go right, that it's either something that the Baseball Association doesn't like the way it's going, or if somebody rents it, something's wrong with the facility, so that we have a way of keeping track of problems that we're running into, so that we make sure that we stay on top of it and we resolve those issues no matter what comes up, whether it's a disagreement between the Baseball Association and the district, or it could be even somebody that's using the field from community ed and has an issue with something that's wrong with the field, so that we have a way of finding out what's going on and making sure that it's taken care of. This particular agreement, as I mentioned, was just something we wanted to put together to make sure that the community said, you know, had an example of what it looked like, so that we'd be able to answer any questions that come up with the community. All the way through this, I've certainly mentioned to the board that I think it would be wise to have a community input session where the board listens to the community, they hear about any issues that they have, any concerns that they might have, so that they can be addressed before the board makes any kind of decision. Tonight certainly is not the time to make a decision, that's not on the agenda, it's more informational for the board to talk. Haven't had a chance for community members, any community members have anything to add? Other questions the board might have?
How flexible will the contracts are usually when they date it and sign it, and they have agreement of when they start, when they stop? Because of the school year, how quirky it is with when we are actually done with school, and is there any
School days.
overlap?
It'll be the last day of, it'll be like the first day of, after the last day of classes.
Okay.
Always. So if you go into June 15th, which you might this year,
July
then
15th, maybe?
yeah, it is June 16th, you know, so.
Okay.
It will never happen when there's school in session.
And I think that's.
And then school
the
never
way
starts
it is.
before Labor Day, you know, so
Right.
the amateur baseball, well, right now, if that ever happens, and it ever happened in a state tournament, that goes until Labor Day weekend. Amateur baseball, I mean, the
Right.
final game is on Labor Day.
When is the first game though?
We won't sub here in the first games, if there's still school going on.
Okay.
It just, that is part of the agreement, and we have no issue with that.
Right, but would that be the start of you'd be starting, oh, I see, okay.
We,
never mind.
yeah.
You want
No,
no
we said
alcohol?
there will,
Okay.
yeah, they might be playing amateur games, there'll be no alcohol until
Until
school
school's
season
over.
is completely done.
Okay.
Until school's over session.
When does the amateur start? When does the season start?
I don't even know anymore. It's,
Yeah.
with the weather the way it's been, it's usually so late anyway anymore. Yeah. I mean, there'll probably be a couple. More than likely, the Pirates, they'll schedule the first few games they have away. Would be my guess. At least when I play there, they'll start in Norway, they'll play in Norway, Luxembourg, and some of those places like beginning, have the games on home later games.
One other thing that I would like to accomplish tonight is I'd like to set a date for a community input meeting, if that's what the board would like to do. I do think, for my recommendation, this would be a wise thing for us to do.
I agree.
I agree.
I will tell you that my schedule gets booked up pretty good right now. My suggestion would be, I have a facilities meeting that, there'll be a short article in the newspaper coming out on Wednesday, that I have a facilities meeting on March 6th, at I think 6:30. I kind of have set some dates up in front of those. If we were to put an article in the newspaper this Friday, a short thing, inviting community members to come in, the one I was thinking of is probably March 13th at 8 o'clock. That way, if I need to have another facility meeting, I could have that before, and then we could have just a listening session afterwards. Will that work then?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll plan on March 13th at 8 o'clock here in the seminar room.
Okay. Next, we have review and consider approval of the food service contract for 2013 to 2015.
I'll just walk the board through the changes. You do have a copy of the contract in your possession. For the most part, a lot of changes to dates. All right? The bigger changes, I'm just gonna go through on page 6 again, it's just dates. On page 7, there was just a slight change to section number 2, where it says to qualify for the district's term insurance and long-term disability insurance programs, medical and hospital insurance. Then you have program, strike out, and then plan. Right now, the food service group goes with PEEP, which is not technically what I would consider to be the district plan. So we wanted to make the language that would work either way. If they stay with PEEP, then it works. If they come back to the district's plan, then it would also work. So we just added those language to that. I think there's only one. On page 9 is the other piece. Excuse me, right down at the bottom, under section 1, subsection 8. What the food service looked for is they wanted to have something if there was some kind of catastrophic event that happened to a food service employee beyond their control. Means we're having a cancer awareness type of thing, fundraiser in a gym today, that's probably the best example, would be, so I get cancer. It would allow other food service people, if they wanted to, and I don't have any sick leave left, to donate up to 40 hours a year for me, out of their sick leave. So it would be taken from their sick leave and be put in there. In order to do that, though, the steward of the union would have to approach the superintendent and would still have to get the superintendent's agreement that this is the thing to do. So in the end, the superintendent still has control over how that's going to be used. So just because somebody comes down with the flu doesn't mean that that's a catastrophic event, for instance. So that was an addition. The other main addition then, of course, is the wages itself. What they get is 10 cents an hour in the first year and 15 cents an hour in the second year. That's reflected in the scale on page 24. And it comes to about $4,351 additional dollars over the course of the 2 years. Any questions on that? If no questions, I would certainly recommend approval of this.
So moved.
We have a motion by Deb,
Second.
second by David. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Passed. Now, number 3,
18 minutes.
18 minutes. Okay. Okay, number 3, so we'll just keep going on. For everybody here, we're going to recess to head to the gymnasium to watch the elementary school students sing at the game, and then we're going to come back. That's what we're done.
Yep, that's right.
Okay, so we then move to personnel. Number 1 in personnel is review and consider approval of resignation request from Bill Brandt, effective the end of the 2013-2014 school year.
Yeah, this was a little bit of a surprise to us. The two people who have resigned between those, you know, they have over 60 years of experience, 65 years of experience in the district. Both for Mary and Bill, I just can't thank them enough for all the service that they've provided for our students.
Okay. Do we have a motion? Motion by Lou, seconded by,
I'll second.
seconded by Deb. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Passed. Review and consider approval of resignation request from Mary Keeble, effective the end of the 2013-14 school year.
So moved.
Moved by Mark,
Second.
second by Cheryl. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Passed. Review and consider approval of request to extend maternity leave of absence for Tammy Mahart to April 14th, 2014.
This is just a request for maternity leave to be extended. I would, I talked to the principals, I would recommend approval.
So moved.
Motion by Cheryl,
Second.
second by Kella. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Passed. Then we have number 4, which is review and consider approval of the following targeted services assignments for the 2013-14 school year.
These really are cost neutral for the most part for us. They're run through targeted services. It's kind of a regular thing that we've done every year and extremely helpful to our students.
So moved.
Motion by Mark,
Second.
second by Deb. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Okay, and then we are on informational reports. Yes, we have custodial negotiations.
We negotiated today, and we have, they're bringing a proposal back to their membership for voting, so I think we're close.
We're hoping that at the next meeting, we will bring that contract forward along with, we're hoping the teacher's contract.
Okay, number 2, we have meet and confer. Deb Lenz.
We met in here earlier today. I'll be honest, it's the first time I've ever been to a meet and confer meeting with that number of teachers and staff and that wide a variety. Interesting. The biggest discussion was on the calendar and how you don't even think about some of the things that get brought up. And just about the time you think you got everybody covered, a little voice goes up in the back of the room, but we got it. Got it.
I think we came up with something that will make everybody happy, but I think solve some of the issues that were brought up.
Okay, then,
Well, we're on 5 snow days now. We're gonna keep the plan that we talked about before, where March 25th was in service again. That'll be moved to the end of the year, to June 2nd. So March 25th will be a snow makeup day. Second snow makeup day would be, I think April 21st, I think, the day after the Easter break. And then the last one, I think, is in June 2nd, I think, and we're moving everything back. At this point, I want to wait and see what happens. Truly, if we don't get any more days, I would be inclined to probably not have the students, at least my recommendation to the board would be not to have the students make it up, but have our teachers make it up in a number of different ways. But I'd like to wait on the last couple of days or the last period of time to see if we get any more snow days. So just be aware of that. UHL, again, will not be done with the recommissioning until about March. I have gotten a few community members together. First meeting, as it will say in the paper, will be on March 6th at 6:30 in the Middle School Media Center. We're certainly inviting all the public, anybody that wants to be part of that discussion or to come to the meeting and listen to what's going on. It's just the start of the discussion. I do want to tell the community that just because we're starting to talk about this doesn't mean that we have a set plan in mind of what we're going to do. We're starting the discussion. The makeup for the 7th and 8th grade choir concert is rescheduled for February 27th at 6:30. That was the one that we lost during the last school makeup day. Jennifer Andrist, teacher at Paynesville, had made the pool of the last 33 for the semifinalists for the Teacher of the Year in Minnesota. So we're going to wait and see how that shakes out. It'd be great if she moves further down the line. We set a date for the stadium. We've also set a date for the facility. Just a reminder that is that go to the Capitol Day is on 3/11/14 and get a hold of Deb Glenz or myself if you're interested in going. It is, I think you would find it very interesting if you take the time to be able to attend that. Last thing that I would like to at least have some discussion with, we talked about a workshop, special work session for the board to talk about MSBA leadership conference, and also PR. What do we do to support PR? Those types of things. Days I'm going to recommend we could go March 4th anytime. March 5th, Wednesday after 5 o'clock. Those will be a couple days. Otherwise, we go further in the year. So if you're interested in doing it right away, I would probably recommend if we can make the decision tonight that we go March 4th so I can get the 3-day posting in. If like I said, March 4th, we could do it anytime, that works for the board. March 5th would be after 5 o'clock. Does the board have a preference, or?
What time did you say, March 4th?
Well, March 4th could really be any time of the day. We could go at 5:30, we could go at 6:30, we could go at 8 o'clock, whatever works for the board. On Wednesday, March 5th, we would just have to make sure that we go after 5 o'clock. I have a commitment to tell them.
We'd like to know tomorrow.
You can let me know tomorrow as long as I know tomorrow. Because I do need to meet the 3-day posting piece for that. In fact, I'll try to send out an email right away in the morning, give you some options. Maybe I'll do a doodle. And I'll put down all the possible days, because we could go later into March also to have that work session, but it'd be good to get it on the books. That's all I
Anything
have.
else? Any other sharing with the board? Not, we have a motion to adjourn? Is there a Second by, motion by Lou, second by Cheryl, all in favor say aye.
Dad, I would get right down to the gym. You'll find this very interesting. You'll enjoy it.